March is finally here, and that means one thing. The striped bass season is open in New Jersey's back bays. If you're itching to get out and get fishing after a long winter but have no idea where to start, this is the video for you. I'll be covering the ins and outs of what you need to know to catch some back bay striper, so let's get into it. Let's start by understanding the migration patterns and early season behavior of striped bass. Knowing this will help you catch more fish. Striped bass typically spend the first years of their lives around where they're born, which is the back bays and rivers. Some striped bass, known as holdovers, choose to remain in local rivers and bays and estuaries throughout the winter. These fish are typically smaller, schoolie-sized fish. As the water warms throughout the spring, these fish may leave the bay and head out to the ocean chasing bait. As spring progresses and water temperatures continue to climb, striped bass begin their northward migration from their wintering grounds. They seek waters within their preferred temperature range of 55 to 68 degrees, making stops to spawn in major bodies of water like the Chesapeake Bay, Delaware River, and the Hudson River. After spawning, these bass continue to migrate northwards, spreading out along the northeast coast. Now let's get into how to catch these stripers, starting with tides and water temperatures. Spring striper fishing is all about finding the warmest water possible. This time of year, water temperature is one of the most important factors. Striper become much more active as the water gets above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But in early March, when the water still lingers around the mid-40s, they're a bit sluggish. This is what makes tide and time of day critical in fishing in the early season. In the early season, I usually prefer to fish an outgoing tide, especially if it lines up with the afternoon. Here's why. As the sun warms the shallows, that heated water gets pulled out with the outgoing tide. That slight temperature increase can make all the difference with getting these sluggish fish to bite. Throughout the year, we tend to turn our attention to the early mornings as the best time to catch fish. However, in the earlier season, these colder mornings aren't always ideal. The water is at its lowest temperature and the striper will be more lethargic. But by midday into the afternoon, the sun has had time to warm up the shallow flats and muddy bottom areas, which retain heat better. So fortunately, if you're lazy and don't like to wake up early, sometimes the afternoons will give you your best shot at catching fish. So where exactly is the back bay? I suppose in its most basic definition, you can consider it anything back behind the inlets and barrier islands. These areas include tidal creeks, rivers, estuaries, and salt marshes, all of which are excellent habitat for striper in the early season. Once again, the key is finding the locations that have the warmer water, and the back bay is where that's going to be. So now that you're in the back bay, what kind of structure are you looking for? First is creeks and river mouths. Small creeks emptying into larger rivers are some of the best spots in the early spring. These areas warm up quickly and trap bait fish, attracting stripers looking for an easy meal. Again, the striper are lethargic this time of year and they're looking for the easiest meal possible they can catch. The next is bridges. Fish love to hang around bridges, so if you can find yourself one, definitely try and fish it. You can also look for muddy bottom areas. Mud absorbs and retains heat better than sand, making muddy bottom flats and channels great spots to find fish in the colder months. And lastly, anywhere with slow current. Again, these fish aren't going to want to fight a heavy current to get a meal, so if you can find yourself a slow current, you might find yourself some fish. Without giving away exact spots, the best places to fish in the early season are the mainland rivers and creeks that lead into the major bays. That means anywhere in the Raritan River, the Toms River, the Mullica River, or even the Delaware River. Any of these rivers, along with the smaller feeder creeks, offer excellent opportunities to catch early season fish. One of the best tools to find good spots is Google Maps. Make sure you're looking for public access points near bridges, bulkheads, and outflows, creek mouths that empty into larger bays, marinas and piers that provide structure and sometimes light at night to attract fish, and muddy bottom areas near shallow flats. By scouting on Google Maps ahead of time, you can save time and maximize your chances of fishing productive water. Now let's get into the tools of the trade. What kind of rod and reel you should be using? In the back bays, you don't need anything super long or super heavy. I like to bring two rods with me, one for bait and one for lures. Your best bet in the back bays is anything from 7 to 8 feet or anywhere in the medium to medium heavy range. For bait, I like to use the Tsunami medium heavy 8-foot rod. You can use any brand 7 to 8 foot rod, but what's most important is just to make sure that the lure rating can handle the weight that you're throwing. For bait in the back bay, I'm typically only throwing 1 to 3 ounces, so if your rod can handle that, then you're good to go. As for the reel, you can use a 4,000 or 5,000 size, spooled with 30-pound braid. As for lures, you're going to want to use something that can handle lighter weight tackle. So for that, I use this 7-foot Fish Heads Inshore medium rod. This can handle 1/4 to 1 ounce lures, which covers all your bases for your back bay needs. As for the reel, I like to pair it with a 3,000 size reel spooled with 20-pound braid. And that's it for rods. Again, it's best to keep it light and simple. If you've got yourself an old freshwater bass setup laying around, you can definitely use that to catch backwater bass. Just make sure to rinse down all your gear with fresh water after an outing because saltwater can be very destructive. When the water's still cold and the fish aren't that aggressive yet, it's best to turn your attention to fishing with bait. So what are the best best back bay baits for this time of year. The number one bait is hands down the bloodworm. Fish absolutely love these creepy little critters, but make sure to be careful when you're handling them because they do have small teeth that can get you. If you can't find bloodworms, sandworms will also work as well. The next back bay bait you can use are fresh or frozen clam. Fresh is obviously preferred, but if you can't get your hands on it, frozen also works. If you can manage to get them, grass shrimp is an incredible back bay bait as well. Sometimes you can even find them preserved. And lastly, you can use the classic chunks of bunker. Make sure to check what your tackle shop has. If they have bloodworms, great, go for those. But if they don't, you've got some fallback options. Another thing to note is that bloodworms can be pretty expensive, so here's a little tip to make the most of your bait. After stringing the bloodworm on the hook, you can tip your hook with a piece of artificial bloodworm like fish bites or gulp. You can also use freeze-dried bloodworms, which are cheap and work really well paired with live bloodworms. That way your premium bait will stay on the hook longer, and you can also use a little less throughout the day. When fishing with bait in the back bay, my go-to rig is a high-low rig. It's super simple to tie up, so let me walk you through how to do that. To tie the high-low rig, you'll need 30-pound leader line. Then you'll need 2 circle hooks. New Jersey law requires inline circle hooks. If you can find them, these are bait holder circle hooks which will help you keep your worms on. You can use hooks between 3/0 and 5/0. For this, I'm splitting it right down the middle and using 4/0. Then you'll need 1 barrel swivel. Optional are 2 bright colored beads to help attract fish. And finally, a bank sinker in the 1 to 3 ounce range. Start with making a loop at one end of the line. Wrap the loop over itself to form an opening. Pull the loop through the opening and tighten. This is where the sinker will go. About 8 to 12 inches above the sinker loop, create a large loop by folding 2 parts of the line over each other. Your lines should now be running parallel to each other. Leaving an opening between the 2 lines, begin twisting the 2 lines over each other. Do this about 5 times. Now take the top of the large loop and thread it through the opening you created. This will require your teeth. Hold the portion of the loop you just pulled through with your teeth and simultaneously pull on both ends of the line. Now you have yourself a dropper loop. You could just stop here and have a rig with just 1 loop, but I usually like to tie 2. About another 8 to 12 inches up, repeat the same process. Create a large loop with the lines parallel to each other. Leaving an opening, twist the line over itself up to about 5 times. Pull the top of the large loop through the opening. Hold with your teeth and pull. Now another 8 to 12 inches above this top dropper loop, cut the line and add your barrel swivel. I'm tying this with a clinch knot, but it's recommended to use either a uni knot or an improved clinch knot. Cut the tag end and you're ready for the next step. Take one of the dropper loops and pinch the end between your teeth to make it easier to thread the bead on the hook. Now take your bead and thread it on the loop. Then take your hook and thread the loop through the front of the eye. Wrap the loop around the hook and pull tight. Repeat this same process on the remaining loop. Thread the bead onto the loop, push the loop through the eye of the hook, wrap it around, and pull. The last step is to add the sinker. Push the first loop you made through the eye of the sinker. Then wrap it around itself and pull tight. Now you're all set with your high-low rig. Just add your worms and you're ready to catch some bass. So what are some good lure choices for the back bay? The most important thing to do in the back bay is to scale down and keep it simple. There are so many lures out there to choose from, but here are some solid choices for back bay fishing. My go-to is always some kind of paddle tail or swim shad. Grab your choice of jig head in the 1/4 to 3/4 ounce range. My favorite is the Magic Tail bullet jig. Then pair it with the white Kettle Creek paddle tails. This combo is very effective. I also like the 3-inch no live bait needed with the 3-inch jig heads. And lastly, I also love the Tsunami swim shads. You can also use small swimming plugs like the Yozuri Mag Minnow or small Daiwa SP minnows. Don't forget the plug bag staple, a small sized bucktail. I also like the Rapala X-Wrap. And lastly, the Tsunami Eye Pop Popper for some topwater action. As for color on these, I either go for white or bone. Again, scale down and keep it simple. Every bit of gear in this video that I've mentioned will be linked down below to fishermansheadquarters.com. If you're looking to stock up for the season ahead, you can use my code SALTYSAM at checkout to get 5% off your entire order. By doing so, you're not only supporting me, but a fantastic local tackle shop and an integral part of our fishing community. So make sure to gear up at fishermansheadquarters.com. There's no better time than now to get out and get fishing. So what are the key takeaways for Back Bay Striper? Focus on the Back Bay rivers and creeks that hold the warmest water possible. Pay attention to the tides, water temperature, and time of day. Start the season with bait, and as the water warms up, start mixing lures in. Look for Back Bay structure like creek mouths, bridges, muddy bottom areas, and outgoing rips. Now with all that said, give yourself a pat on the back for making it through winter. I hope you found these tips helpful to get out and get fishing, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm so excited to get out there soon and get lines in the water. I think it's going to be a great year. So once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you on the next one.